Good morning, everyone. My name is Alfred Cromwell. I am the founder and president of City Tutoring. I'm speaking to you from Lynchburg, Virginia today, and today's video is going to be about the a couple of problems that some students have asked me to solve for the SAT as practice. I'm still not impressed with the questions that I see on the SAT, but I think we've been through this discussion before. I don't like the new format, the digital format of the SAT, but it's not about me. It should be about what you're studying. And so that's why this video is going to be relevant to those of you in particular who are taking the SAT at some point this year or next year, because the format is not going to change, at least not for the foreseeable future. I do want to thank all my students, by the way, those students who have me in class. I want to thank you for your hard work. Last week, I want to thank you also for you've been on your best behavior, some of you, and I know for some of you, the structure of City Tutoring is a little bit different than what you're used to. Maybe you come from a public school where discipline is not part of the agenda. But at City Tutoring, not only do we take our classes seriously, but we also take law and order. We take a very structured approach. I would like to ask you, though, those of you who have been joining us and who are watching me as I speak, and you've been through some of the classes at City Tutoring, I would ask you to be conscientious, though, about punctuality. We start everything here on time, including classes. Punctuality is important. It's part of self-discipline. It's part of a character-framed life. And you really rob other people of what belongs to them. It's their time too, if you are not punctual. Now, I know sometimes things happen, and that is totally understandable, but I'm talking about people who make it a habit to be habitually late, to not be punctual. It is a sign of a bad habit. And I don't wish to break anyone except bad habits. And we are in the business. You cannot be a good student. You cannot be a conscientious student if you don't have at least some kind of structure or order in your personal life. Especially when students who feel some kind of challenge in math, you need to be able to have some kind of study plan and also strategies for the things that are challenging you, the concepts that are challenging you in math. So I'm going to take this video and share with you some of the problems. I won't be able to do as always. I always have some kind of agenda, but let's see if I can show you the key. You should be able to see on my screen the problems here. So I'm going to try to do the 2 pages. I got 2 pages here worth of problems. The first one, see if I can make this bigger. The first one is asking you about a function. It says the given function G models the number of gallons of gasoline that remains from a full gas tank in a car. So the question is asking, according to this linear model, notice the trend. They're starting to introduce things like model, right? Because they want you to think about linear model, but it's really an equation. Or a linear function of some kind. According to the model, about how many gallons of gasoline are used to drive each mile. So what they're testing here is that you're able to identify the specific parts of an equation. So the function here, it's telling you that negative 0.05 m plus 12.1. The coefficient of the slope here is negative 0.05. This means that, remember that when they're testing for slope, it means that for every single increase in the value of m, when it increases by 1, the value decreases by 0.05. So if by that same logic, for each mile you drive, there's going to be a decrease of 0.05 gallons of gas. So the correct choice here would be A. Right, so so basically what they're identifying here is the coefficient here, the 0.05. So hopefully that makes sense. None of the other choices make any sense whatsoever. Really, the new SAT tends to include questions and answer choices that make absolutely no sense. You can narrow down your choices when you are doing the SAT, and thus increase your probability of getting the correct answer if it is indeed a multiple choice question. Then we have question number 10. All right, it says the given equation relates the positive. Okay, so they're saying b, x, and y are positive, which equation correctly expresses x in terms of b and y. Remember, we talked about this. I mentioned it last week, that when you get a problem that asks you for something in terms of, it's really saying solve for x in this case. So whatever variable comes after expresses, that is what you are solving for. And clearly you don't have, this is not solved for x yet. So we have to do some kind of rearranging here. We got to get x by itself. Well, we have fractions, right? And remember we said one of the ways you can get rid of some pesky fractions, sometimes they can be pesky, is to multiply by at least one of the denominators. And if we multiply one of the denominators here, the easiest one is y. So if we multiply the both sides of this by y, remember you got to treat both sides equally in an equation. You cannot play favorites. That's why it's called an equation. If you multiply it by y, you now have y over 7b equals 11x. And from there, you need to isolate x. So you have to divide each side of the equation by 11. If we divide both sides by 11, you actually get x is equal to y over 77b. And therefore, answer choice C. Right? I hope you all see that y. All right, so always isolate for what you're doing. And then what is the next one here? Number 11, it says the graphs of the given equations are in the xy plane, and they intersect at the point xy. What is a possible value? Okay, so this is what we call a nonlinear system of equations. And remember that the points, especially when you have two solutions here, x and y, whatever they are intersecting. It's an intersection point that if you were to graph this. Now, I know some of you I know on the new SAT, you're allowed to use Desmos. I'm not going to bother with Desmos, and it's just not my style. But you can use Desmos if it's faster, and you could see where the points intersect. But we need to find out the solution here. So according to, when you look at the first equation, y is equal to 76. So if you plug that in to the second equation, right, you're going to do some substitutions there. Now you get x squared minus 5 equals 76. And if that's the case, if you add, now we can add 5 to both sides of the equation. We now have x squared, which is equal to 81. And if we take the square root here, right? Remember this, since they're squaring, you could take the square root. That is the opposite of squaring something. So now you get two answers here. You get plus or minus 9. And out of the two solutions, right, only negative 9 is one of the choices, and therefore answer choice B. All right, number 12. Now, number 12 is giving you, they're saying that the point here, x comma 53, is a solution to, now you have a system of inequalities, and they do exist. It's not just always equal to, but they're telling us that x comma 53 is a solution to the system. So what that means, they're talking about the coordinates of the point. When you substitute them for the variables x and y, it would make both of the inequalities in the system be true statements. Remember, an equation is a true statement. So if we plug in 53 for y, right, we have an inequality here. Y is greater than 14. So if we said 53 is greater than 14, we can play around with that now, because this is a system which is true, or this statement is true. 53 is indeed greater than 14. So if you now substitute it in the second inequality, you have 4x plus 53 is less than 18. And if that's the case, now we can solve as a similar to normal equations or linear equations. You subtract 53 from both sides. If we do that, we now have 4x is less than, well, 18 minus 53. You're going to get a negative number. And that's going to yield negative 35. Now you can solve easily here. If you divide both sides by 4, you get a decimal, right? Because you can't divide 35 into 4 without getting some kind of remainder. So x has to be a value that is less than, it's going to be less than negative 8, right? So out of the given choices here, the only one that works, that would be less than negative 8 point something, would be choice A, negative 9. So that wasn't too bad, was it? And this is module 2, by the way. This is module 2 of the SAT. Number 13, it says, out of 300 seeds that were planted, 80% sprouted. Again, I've told you this many times before. When you have a word problem that has a percentage given to you, automatically it should, at least for testing purposes, it should be multiplication in your mind, right? Because what we're doing is 80% of 300. So this becomes 80 over 100. You can write percentages as fractions over 100, which is really 8/10, by the way. You can cross out the zeros there. So you have 8/10 multiplied by 300. And that's going to give you 240. So the answer choice here, it's a numerical answer, so it's just 240. All right. Number 14, it says the function is defined by f of x equals 4x. For what value of x does f of x equals 8? Okay, so this is the classic substitution here. If you substitute 8 for f of x, remember f of x is another way of saying y. So we now have 8 equals 4x. So what number times 4 gives you 8, right? And that would be x is equal to 2. So he takes care of that one. Now, in terms of number 15, these are some of my preferred ones. So I do like the ones where they ask you to look for an equivalent expression. So they're saying, okay, so you have kind of like a polynomial looking thing here, rational expression, sort of. Well, what they're testing here is that you can factor in some way, or see if you can find some way you can kind of play around with this. We do have a common factor of, in the denominator, we have a common factor of 2. So if that's the case, we can write this, we can factor the bottom here. And if we keep the top part, we can factor that as 2 parentheses x minus 7. See if my pen lets me do it. 2 parentheses x minus 7. And so what happens now is, notice in the numerator, they all have x minus 7 now as the 3 terms in the expression. That is a common factor of x minus 7. And it's telling you that x is greater than 7. So that means that x cannot be equal to 7, which means x minus 7 cannot be equal to 0. So that means that you can divide each term in the expression by that x minus 7. So that means that if you divide each term by x minus 7, you're just left with basically 8x minus 3. These all cancel. And you get 8x minus 3 over 2, which is answer choice B. So definitely practice your factoring. The other day, I gave a student a list of 10 problems, and this student was normally fairly good at factoring. He could not factor the last 4 questions because they were taken from my textbook. And if you don't have a solid grounding in algebra, you're not going to be able to solve without training, of course, some of the problems that I have in my textbook. The next one is 16. This one is some kind of geometry or analytic geometry. Line P is defined by 2y plus 18x equals 9. Line R, okay, so now they're saying line is perpendicular. So they do ask about perpendicularity occasionally. So if they tell you that a line, in this case R, is perpendicular to another line, in that case P, that means that the slope, remember the slope of perpendiculars is the negative reciprocal of the slope of line P. So if we write this kind of in slope-intercept form, remember slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. That is a linear equation in the typical standard form or slopes, where m, right, m is a constant and so is b. So that means m is always the slope of the line and 0, comma b would be the y-intercept. So if you subtract 18x here from both sides of the equation, you have the original equation that you have here is 2y plus 18x equals 9. So we can subtract 18x from both sides, and we now have 2y. That would give us 2y equals negative 18x plus your 9. So it's just testing to see. And then from here, you can divide both sides because you want to isolate y. So you can divide both sides by 2. If you divide both sides by 2, you get negative 9x. And they're asking you, what is the slope, right? So if they're asking you for the slope, the negative, since it's negative 9, but it's the negative reciprocal. So the negative reciprocal would be negative 1, negative 9, which means positive 1 over 9. Answer choice C. And finally, what I have here, number 17, what are them asking me here? It says the graph, which of the following is the best interpretation of the y-intercept, of this graph? Well, one way you can understand this is remember that when you're talking about the y-intercept of a graph, it's really where the point equals, in this case, t, where t equals 0. And it's telling us here the y-intercept, in order for you to be able to find that, you could substitute 0 for t in the original equation, right? Any number to the 0, by the way, becomes 1, just so you know. So you can, let me see if it shows that I'm crossing it out. So this becomes t equals 0 here. And if that's the case, this is like saying multiplying 8,000, right, times 1. And 8,000 times 1 is just 8,000. So the y-intercept now, we have the y point. We now have 0, comma 8,000. So it's telling you that the function models, it's talking about the number of coupons that a company sent their customers. So that is representing the estimated number of the coupons the company sent to their customers at the end of each year. It also tells you, by the way, it tells you that T represents the number of years since the end of 98, since the end of 1998. So if T equals 0, if that represents 0 years since the end of 98, the best way you can interpret this is that the estimation of the number of coupons for the company was 8,000, right? That was your starting point, was 8,000. There was a similar question to that, by the way, in the last model that we did. So the only thing from the answer choices here, A doesn't make sense, right? Because it says the minimum estimate. That doesn't make sense here given this relationship. B says the minimum estimated number of coupons the company. Well, that's similar, but it's telling you that it's the same thing as A, but now it's telling you 8,000. So that's still not the same. It's still the same logic. C says the estimated number of coupons the company sent to their customers at the end of 98. No, it can't be 1,428 because we just said it was going to equal to 8,000 based on this relationship. So the only thing that works is D. So I hope this was helpful for those of you taking the SAT at some point this year or next year. And we'll be in touch again for others. I was going to do a video on imaginary numbers, complex numbers, but we'll see. I'll do it based on the comments, that if you have any questions or anything, let me know in the comments down below anything that you want to cover on this channel, because I cover any math topic really. And if you want to establish a relationship with City Tutoring, don't hesitate to call us. We are in Lynchburg, Virginia, but we service, students all over the world, basically. And you want to give us a call, the area code is 434, and the number is 856-6848, and you can call us and tell us what your needs are. We now have, by the way, I ask you that you please subscribe, continue to subscribe. I always appreciate any subscription because this channel is just growing. I never would have imagined. Can you imagine how incredible life is? I never would have imagined years ago, and especially not 2 weeks ago, given that I was completely off grid, that this channel was going to explode in the way it has. But it's really encouraging to see so many young people participating, and also not so, of all ages. But it is very encouraging to me to see our demographics. And a lot of our demographics are students between the ages of 18 to 24. We also get some younger people too, between 15, 17. And I think most of those are because they've already matriculated at City Tutoring. And we also get people who are just older folks who are just interested in learning more and more math. I do want to start a series also on abstract algebra. If you're in college, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're a math major, I also do abstract algebra. It was one of my favorite courses as an undergrad. And one of these days, I will also do a video on, I made a video on how I became a mathematician, but I didn't show you the journey there, right? I kind of talked more a little bit about my book. By the way, those of you interested in my book, it's called Mathemachicken to Mathematician, and you can find it easily on Amazon. And it does outline some of how, but I do want to discuss what inspired me in my early years and I had always had the instinct of becoming some kind of math instructor. Most mathematicians are not interested in teaching. And I know why, because they know that the way that many schools are set up is that they are set up to fail students. You are set up from failure to failure from the beginning, particularly people who live in marginalized communities around the country. The education system is atrocious. And so that's kind of where we step in a little bit. But if we had the same standards of excellence for all our students, and instead of having bureaucrats who have no idea about education and some of them have never even stepped into a classroom, if we had a little bit more of actual mathematicians in charge of the math departments, a lot of things would change in this country. And hopefully, who never knows, maybe there's going to be a shakeup of the Department of Education. I can only hope, because when I look at so many failing districts in this country, it is appalling. Math is the future. Math is the future. I don't care what anybody tells you. A lot of the new jobs, a lot of the new waves of with the tech and all that is related to math. So we need to shape up as a nation with our math standards. We need to waste less time on fake projects, fake engineering, and focus on what really matters. And what students and parents really want is a quality education. They're not interested in some bureaucrats' political fantasies. I certainly am not interested in them here at City Tutoring. Here at City Tutoring, we're interested in one thing only: your academic success. And we start from the basics. We build our way up. We don't waste time with this whole identity nonsense and this whole thing that we're seeing in many of our public schools. That's why many of our public schools are We have disorder, chaos in so many of them. There are some good gems out there, of course. I don't mean to generalize with this, but the ones that are bad are really bad actors, and they need to shape up. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it was useful to you, and we will be in touch, of course.